A good Erev Shabbos. Just going by the conversations at the Kiddush, and before and after the Minyan, it seems like the question of leadership is on a lot of people's minds these days, mainly political leadership, but really leadership in general. Leadership in Canada has certainly been a hot topic of conversation over the last months and years, certainly more so in the past couple of weeks. Leadership is about to change on Monday for our neighbor to the south. Some KSTers will be on hand to witness the event. According to The Economist news magazine, 42 countries around the world with 4 billion citizens, about half of the planet's population, had elections last year to elect new leaders. Over 1 billion ballots were cast in 2024. That is an awful lot of democracy. Where are we now and where are we headed now that governments are changing in Canada, the US, Germany, France, Austria, the UK, Algeria, South Africa, among the 42 countries? Surely we'll be better off, right? Another time we'll deal with the question that's at least as important, if not more so, than leaders, and that is followers. The followers not only elect the leaders, but we also do the following. So how is that going? And what is followership all about? There's dozens of institutes and books and theories and seminars about leadership, but nobody talks about followership. Another time we'll delve into that. As for the leadership of the Jewish people, our greatest was born 3,417 years ago, minus 6 weeks. His birthday is the 7th of Adar. Moshe Rabbeinu, is still our teacher in serious ways. We call him Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our teacher. We never met him. How can he be our teacher? Because Vizot HaTorah Asher Sam Moshe Lifnei Bnei Yisrael Al Pi Hashem Biyad Moshe. This is the Torah which Moshe placed before the children of Israel according to God's command into the hand of Moshe. We have read the book. We continue to read the book every week, every day. Some of us have seen the movie. The portion of Shemot, which we read this week, gives us background and insight into this great leader of the Jewish people. And it certainly gives us plenty to think about in terms of what leadership is and what qualities we should be looking for, at least ideally. You can't really choose the family you're born into, your background, and the commentaries take the opening of the book of Exodus to underscore this point. Moshe was born under a decree of death to children at a very low point in Jewish history, yet through an amazing set of circumstances. He was born prematurely. His mother set him adrift down the Nile. The daughter of Pharaoh just happened to be in denial at that moment. So for more insight into this, we have a special edition of Women's Learning this Shabbat morning. Stay tuned. Don't miss that. In short, what had to happen happened, and Moshe not only lived, but lived as a prince in Pharaoh's palace. And when the time came, he was ready to answer the call to leadership, however reluctantly. Here we already see a difference from most any other hero in literature. Chapter 2 of Exodus opens with these words. It says, "A man from the house of Levi went and married a daughter of Levi." Moshe is a human being. He's born like the rest of us, flesh and blood. He's not divine. He didn't descend from a cloud. That means that leadership, not to mention Torah, is not acquired by inheritance or magic or even divine right. Not because you're somebody's kid do you get the job. So what are the prerequisites for the job? Well, Moshe appears to have charisma. He's born with an aura about him. That can work for you and against you. He does have a royal upbringing, which is also something to be overcome. Nobody likes a leader who's labeled as a palace insider. We assume they'll work for their own interests, not the interests of the people. Ibn Ezra says that if Moshe would have grown up and been educated in a Jewish home, he probably would have had the exile mentality that we know and we're familiar with, that might have prevented him from being able to rise to the occasion of selflessness and bravery. The Ibn Ezra writes, quote, "Perhaps God arranged things so that Moses would grow up in a royal house, and his spirit would thereby be exalted through learning and practice. He would not thus possess a base spirit habituated to being in the house of slaves. Do you not see that Moses killed an Egyptian because the latter committed an act of violence? One more thing, says the Ibn Ezra. Had Moses grown up among his brothers, and had they known him from his youth, they would not have feared him. They would not have considered him one of themselves. End of the quote. They say that a prophet is never honored in his own city. This is the emotional or human reality that if it's someone you know from growing up, it's hard to give them their full due of honor. We see that Moshe had a sense of justice and a sense of empathy. He saw the Egyptian harassing the Jew, and it says, Moshe looked ko v'ko. He looked both ways, maybe to see if anyone was looking. Maybe he was looking into the Egyptian's past to see if he had any excuses, and into his future to see if he had any redeeming qualities. Why don't people do this anymore? Rashi explains there, by the way, that Moshe killed the mean Egyptian taskmaster by uttering a name of God. Now, this should be the way of killing. Let's take all the guns away. If you know the divine name and how to kill with it, and it works, then you're allowed to do it. If you don't know it, you don't deserve to have the power of death over another person. Abarbanel ties all the events in young Moshe's life together for us so they make sense in his development as a leader. Moshe was exiled to Pharaoh's palace so he could learn leadership and monarchy and develop courage. This made him a heroic, fearless person, unwilling to tolerate evil, either in Egypt or Midian. He knew that he was a Hebrew, but he conducted himself as an Egyptian prince so that he'd be able to accomplish more. For example, says Me'am Loez, Moshe suggested to Pharaoh that the slaves be given a day of rest. If they worked too hard, they would die. They wouldn't be of any use at all to Pharaoh. So Pharaoh agreed to let them work 6 days and have a rest day on the 7th day. In our Shabbos morning davening, we therefore say, Yismach Moshe b'matnas chelkot. Let Moses rejoice in his portion, because when we were all given the Torah and the mitzvah to rest on the 7th day, Moshe had already advocated for us to have that very day as a day of rest. Now God confirmed it. The well-known image of the leader as a shepherd or a pastor responsible for each member of the flock. Nowadays, even that's become a business book, which, by the way, comes highly recommended. The title is The Modern Shepherd, Leadership Lessons from the Desert. It's a quick and enjoyable read. But even before there were MBAs mining every bit of their life experience for a book, we were recounting a midrash about this week's parsha, about Moshe the shepherd. So great was his dedication to his work as a shepherd that he went so far as to pay attention and to bring back even those lost sheep who had strayed away from the flock. He searched high and low for one little shepsela that had gone missing, finally found it sipping water by the side of a stream. When he turned back to bring that little lamb back to the flock, that's the moment when he noticed the burning bush and his career was launched. Perhaps that was the whole job interview right there. God saw his concern and said, in God's infinite wisdom, that's the guy I want. Moshe himself doesn't want the job as leader, by the way. First, he declines the offer. He says he's not up to it, but God says, I'm sending you on a mission, and I'll be with you, and you'll succeed. And you can take your brother Aaron with you if you feel he's a better public speaker. There's an important point there that Rabbi Aaron Soloveitchik highlights, comparing Moshe to his brother Aaron. I know for those who have a sibling, there's nothing worse than being compared, but we often refer to Moshe in shorthand as the exemplar, the living example of emes v'tzedek, truth and righteousness, and Aaron as embodying kindness and peace, chesed and shalom. In fact, the Torah sometimes mentions Aaron first, sometimes mentions Moshe first, to show the balance. And certainly these were not their only qualities. Each had the other's midos or qualities as well. The point being that this was the one that stood out in this one or that one's life and work. So he says this, which might be instructive for our times and our questions of leadership. We note that Aaron was chosen as God's main spokesman to the Jews, and Moshe was the main ambassador to Pharaoh. In all our endeavors, we need truth and righteousness. We need emes v'tzedek, and we also need kindness and peace, chesed and shalom. And the context is important. Our audience matters. When we're speaking with a ruler like Pharaoh, we lead with truth and justice, emes v'tzedek. If we open with kindness in that situation, we're likely to be taken advantage of, or worse. So kindness and peace are important, but they're not the most important values when talking to Pharaoh. You want to keep peace with Pharaoh? Okay, remain his slaves and don't complain. Obviously, that's not sustainable. There came a point where Moshe had to say, the God of the Hebrews says, let my people go and serve me on the mountain. By the same token, in internal affairs, tzvishanuns, great pronouncements and ultimatums and orders are not the way to go. When it's dealing with the chevra, chesed and shalom should lead. First comes kindness and peace. From there, we'll find our way to emes v'tzedek, hopefully, anyway. See, there's no one rule and no one ruler or leader who has all the right answers all the time. Midrash Rabbah finds support in a verse in Tehillim, Psalm 85. So Midrash says, is speaking about the qualities of Moshe and Aaron. Chesed ve'emes nifgoshu, it says, tzedek v'shalom nashaku. Kindness and truth met, righteousness and peace kissed. Nifgoshu, meeting. When you meet, it implies coming together for negotiating, maybe conceding a little bit, meeting each other in the middle. Kissing, nashaku, implies much more. It's about alliance and brotherhood. We're all in this together. It's a larger conversation when we're talking about the important internal spiritual work of all times. To talk to Pharaoh, hopefully the leaders know what to say and do. When we're talking to our own Pharaoh, the Pharaoh inside of each of us that wants to keep the peace by remaining enslaved to whatever it happens to be, it's a different kind of challenge. So if we have a little Pharaoh inside of us keeping us captive, we also have a spark. Every Jew has a spark of Moshe Rabbeinu in us too, saying, let my people go. So writes the Me'or Einayim, Rabbi Menachem Nachum of Chernobyl. So the freedom, the real freedom, as we know, is one who engages with Torah, so that we each have that portion somewhere waiting for us to discover it too. That's an expression of what we say at the very beginning of davening. We read the 13 principles of textual interpretation, the Bryce of Rabbi Yishmael, and we say a little Yehi Ratzon right before the Kaddish de Rabbanan. On page 52, 53 in your Siddur, we say, may it be your will, O God and God of our ancestors, that the holy temple be rebuilt speedily in our days, and you grant us our share in your Torah. V'tein chelkeinu v'Torah techa. Torah is vast, Torah is infinite, Torah is godly. We all have a chelik in it. We all have a share. It's our own individual bit. For some of this, it's this, for some it's that, for some it may be Psalms, for others, the history really speaks to them, or the grandeur of Exodus, or the purity of Leviticus, or the spreadsheets of Numbers. The Gemara in Nida says that we're actually rediscovering the Torah. When we learn something, somehow it resonates with something deep in our souls that we may even feel we recognize. So let this be a continued opportunity and invitation for people to continue to discover their portion of Torah, whenever possible, to celebrate that learning with the community, all in good health, all in true freedom, all in peace. Peace in our world, peace amongst ourselves, and peace within ourselves. Shabbat Shalom.